On today's episode of the Free Outside Show, I am joined by Kelly Newlin, who is a chef, and she runs Real Athlete Diets. She also works as an agent for a few athletes, and it's a pretty cool story where she enjoyed running growing up and then just made it more and more a part of her life, combining it with her other interests and talents. So it's pretty cool. So we get into that. We talk about the highs and lows and current state of trail running and all that fun stuff. Also, I'm going to be down at Black Canyon, so that'll be fun. Come up and say hi and that you actually listen to the show, because it's hard for me to believe that people do. I started this to try to get better at talking to people because it's hard for me to talk to people. Sometimes I have like a little stutter or something, so I have to like slow down my talking a little bit because talking is not that intuitive, you know. Anyways, 5-star reviews really help. freeoutside.substack.com. There's articles every Wednesday. Patreon.com. There's articles every Wednesday. For like $5 a month, you can join in. That just supports the show and everything I put out. I usually put out a video on YouTube 2 throughout the week. How do I have time to do all this on top of coaching athletes? Well, it's 7 in the morning and I'm doing this, so probably just by working all the time. But like I told someone recently, it's way better than it is way better than when I was overworked, when I was working in the corporate world, doing like tax and financial stuff. So, you know, it's not that bad. It's enjoyable when it's your passion. Also, we gotta jump in here and thank Jonji.com because they're, well, just Jonji, but you can find them. You can find their virtual store at Jonji.com. I've tried, it works. They're coming out with like new season stuff. I actually just got a peek look at the buyer's guide and cool stuff. More sun hoodies, spoiler alert. So you should check out their stuff because some of the stuff from current season deals, including like Boreal fleece line tights, which are solid if you're a tight person, that moves from current season deals to sales. So then, you know, it's for sale for less. So you should check that out. Jonji.com. Tell them I sent you. Yeah, it's been like a weird week. We had good weather here. It was like in the 40s maybe, melted off everything. We actually got a notice from the city that we had to shovel our sidewalk. I live in an apartment and there's like 4 of us here. I shoveled every single time. I was just like waiting because they don't fine you until they give you a warning here. So I was just hoping someone else would do it. And then I ended up shoveling and I got a blister on my hand because we have a lot of sidewalk to shovel. It was like chip and ice. And then now it's dropped again to like -10 or something, and it snowed. It might have even hit blizzard status, so that sucks. And I also have a workout today. So I'm going to be going to the gym to do that on a treadmill, which is honestly, workouts on a treadmill are easier than just running on a treadmill because you can change up so many factors as far as like vert, speed, intensity, all that kind of stuff. You can change when you're doing a workout versus when you're just running. It's like, I'll just move it up 0.1 more miles an hour. Yeah, and so kind of rounding into form here for Coconut. I had a pretty large speed block, but also incorporated a lot of strength recently. I talk about that in the Substack this week. I titled it, Is Base Building Dead? So yeah, I do know how to make a clickbait title. Take that outside. Someone asked me recently why I don't write for Outside anymore, or much. And I think it's like a lot of people you've seen that don't write for publications as much anymore is the ones that we used to write for. The rates didn't really go up when the cost of living has basically doubled since COVID. So that doesn't really seem like it's gonna work. So I figured I would start a Substack. It's all free. You should go check it out and subscribe. It really makes me feel good to see these things I'm putting out there doing well and just taking control of having my own voice. I mean, I am nervous before every podcast. It's just not really my personality, but my whole life I've wanted to attack things head on that I am uncomfortable with because I just don't want to be the way I am. Wow, you could tell I didn't have therapy this week. But I like swimming in open water, terrified of that. So I started doing triathlons and training in open water. Now, no fear whatsoever doing it. What else? So talking to people, this podcast. Another way is I did stand-up comedy open mic nights in Denver because I was scared of crowds and disappointment. So what did I do? I put myself right in front of a crowd so they could watch my disappointment because no one's good their first time up. So that's basically what I've done. Like FKTs, didn't know if I could do them. Scared of disappointment. Wow, there's kind of a theme here. So all I'm saying is thanks for being here. It means a lot, and you are getting to watch personal growth. How fun is that? All right, let's continue this banter on another pod because I'm recording another one here in 30 minutes with someone else. So thank you for listening. This is Kelly Newlin. Oh, I also realized this is probably coming out after I was down at Black Canyon. So you should check out some of the content me and Derek Lytle put out around it. We are basically making trail running fun again. Or probably we should just take out again. We are making trails and races and ultra marathons and through hiking and FKTs fun. Again, I can't stop myself. Maybe it's our commander in chief with this pandemic of again. Okay, here's Kelly Newlin. Today on the Free Outside Show, we are joined by Kelly Newlin, who is a runner, a chef, agent, Nuggets fan, really just an overall helpful person and really good at embracing and elevating the community. And so where I wanted to start, Kelly, is I think something people look for and try to do in their lives is find a community and find their passion and find a combination of the two to incorporate into their life. And I just want to hear the journey of like rad real athlete diet coming about and how you could combine trail running and cooking or being a chef, because that seems like a crazy thing that you were able to combine.
Yeah, first, thank you for having me, Jeff. I'm such a fan, and I feel really fortunate that I have gotten to know you over the past few months. So it's nice full circle to be on your podcast. I appreciate it.
Thanks.
Um, I grew up running, and I very early in life sort of was fortunate enough to realize that I wanted to be a chef as a profession. So fast forward through, like my whole career, went to culinary school and worked in many restaurants for several years. And then when we moved to Boulder, I found myself being in the situation where a lot of friends would say, "Hey, can you feed me?" Or like as a contract kind of basis, like
Mhm.
feed me or make meals for me while I train for this Ironman or this marathon or ultra or fill in the blank. And I was doing that kind of just on the side because you really like to help your friends and it was fun. Um, and it was unlike other work that I was doing. So one day a friend called me and he said, "Hey, I'm training for Kona. Can I just hire you to feed me for, 3 meals a week for the next couple months?" And it was sort of the first time in my life that I had actually said no to, like, overcommit. I was always overcommitting myself like a lot of us do. Um, and I was like, Angelo, I'm just stretched too far. Like, I have to say no. I'm so sorry." And then I hung up the phone and I was driving home, uh, from work and I literally said the words out loud. "Why am I not doing that? That's what I should be doing." And I loved what I was doing, and I was, had just, kind of helped, worked with a friend who started like one of the very first food trucks in Boulder. I was teaching at a culinary school in town, and I was doing contract work at a youth recovery program, like a transition home for kids after they go through recovery and then into their back into life. So I was kind of working. I had a lot going on.
Yeah, no wonder you said no.
And I loved all 3 of those things, um, but it was and they were all because it's so different, I'm really ADD. I'm sure the listener will figure that out so very quickly if they haven't already, but, um, doing so many different things was really helpful just to my brain. So, but I said no because I had to. And then immediately, those words, like I said, they just kind of came flowing out. So, I'm driving home, it was like 10 minutes from our house. By the time I got home, I just walked in the door and I told my husband Morgan, I was like, "Hey, I'm gonna start a company. I'm gonna feed professional athletes, and it's gonna be called RAD, Real Athlete Diets." And that was the end of that.
Wow. And so do you quit everything immediately and dive headfirst? And how do you build this thing that what I think is cool is because it's almost like you created something that didn't really exist. It's not like you were going into having a lot of competition, but how did you build and even let people know that you had this thing going that was specialized in their sports?
Yeah, that's the big question, right? Like, how did it all work out then? So, within a couple months, we had like an LLC, a business license, all the things. I kept teaching. I very quickly backed off working with the youth recovery program, which I really loved that work so much, but it was also really emotional, like, emotionally and physically draining, so something had to give. So I just narrowed it down. I went adjunct at the culinary school I was working at. And then my husband, who, uh, at the time was sort of in a transition with his career or his job within the company he worked at, they had terminated, like, his sort of department, and then they asked him, like, "Hey, we've created a different position for you. This is the deal. Or you could take a severance with this and then, go on your own way." And I think they were surprised when it all just timing worked out, Jeff. Uh,
Yeah.
but I think they were surprised when he was like, "You know what? I think I'm gonna take the severance. I'm gonna help my wife start this company." Um so Morgan then proceeded to fill up our calendar like nonstop with local running stores, cycling stores, you name it, fun runs, all the things. And he would book everything, and I would get home from teaching and then feverishly prep to do whatever we were going to do. For the first year, it was just sort of nonstop, and we were everywhere because of the effort that Morgan put in to make us just present everywhere.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, so it must have been like can't say no to any jobs because you're scared if you won't have one down the line a little bit. That's the classic entrepreneurial mindset that
Oh my gosh, yeah. I'm so grateful to be able to be in the position I am now where I can say no to things if it doesn't feel like a good fit. Because you're right, you say yes to everything, even if it's like for $200, uh,
Yep.
because you have no money yet and you just have to get out there, right? And to answer your question about there was not competition in this sort of field. There were like Green Chef and the meal delivery things. And it immediately I was like, well, why isn't no one else doing this? Surely there must be someone else, especially in Boulder, right?
Mhm.
Doing this. But there was not. And then I thought, well, okay, why? That's very strange. And I think the answer is because it's really freaking hard.
Yeah.
It's really hard, and there's not a lot of money in it. Especially until you figure out what that balance looks like, right? Um, and I remember telling Morgan, I was like, "This is gonna be really hard." And he was like, "I know. Yeah, I know it's gonna be hard." I'm like, "He has no idea. I know it's." But I've helped restaurants start up before, and I've been in the industry for a really long time, and my husband is a very hard worker, but it's a different kind of hard. Uh
Mhm.
so, that was, he still says every once in a while, like, "Remember when I used to scoop all the meatballs by hand?" Or we just wash pots until, our fingers were bleeding kind of thing. So, um, you have to really want it. Like, it was gonna happen and that was it. Right? Like,
Yeah. There's
knew.
no choice, no
Yeah.
way to quit.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
So I really am happy now that we can say no to certain things. Yeah.
yeah. And fast forwarding to more present time. So it sounds like you help or support a lot of like FKTs and things, at least with food and stuff. What kind of things, how does coming from the FKT world, how does someone know what they want, and how do you help cook the food that they need or want?
Oh gosh, when you know this because you are the FKT guy. Like you have so much experience with this, but especially the first few that you did that were very long,
Mhm.
right? Like multi-day, multi-week. And you're gonna didn't you just commit to the AT this year?
Yeah, yep.
Yeah. In the beginning, do you remember thinking like, this is what I'll eat, this because this is what I train with, and I know that, so I'm gonna get all this stuff organized. And then you get into
Yeah,
it and you're like, I didn't use half that because I just wanted pizza. Uh, so
totally. That's why I'm wondering how you can plan when the person you're supporting is gonna go through a change of heart halfway through anyways.
exactly. I think that what I find works best is there's certain sort of stages to it, right? Where you can get like organized for the first couple weeks, or like we know what the first week is pretty much going to look like. And I'll bring kind of like staples of things that there's a lot of plug and play
Mhm.
to it. And then you just kind of go by it. You have to be pretty adaptable. And don't take it personally if someone in the morning is like, "Ah, this is what I want for dinner." And then you get to dinner and they're like, I have no interest in eating that. Uh, so you do have to have a few options on hand and be as prepared as you can without being like too far ahead of the game that everything goes out the window. Uh,
Yeah.
it kind of feels like this past summer I did a 5-week expedition with a Australian runner who ran the length of the Seine from source to sea in France. Uh, so it was kind of like every 4 days or 5 days, I would replenish things and then
Was
check in with her, and, you know, when you find something that you like out there, it lasts for a couple days, and then you're like, "I don't wanna eat that ever again."
Yep.
So it's just a lot of that. So much of it is just being flexible and adapting.
Yeah, you're like the chef with the least amount of ego over their food because so many chefs are just, like, committed to, "You have to like this," type
Yeah.
of thing.
Well, that's a really good point because the biggest thing that is helpful is to recognize, like, this FKT is not about me at all.
Mhm.
I'm here to serve this person. But that's another reason a lot of chefs don't do this because they cannot. Like you said, we are a super egotistical bunch. I speak from experience, but just at the age of 54, I have less ego than I did at 44 or 34, right?
You have to. You've chosen the industry, the group of athletes that's stomachs go south so quickly, that have changes of preferences at the drop of a hat. It's crazy what you choose to support, and it's so cool, but man.
Fun. Yeah, I would love to work with you sometime ever, if we win the lottery,
Mhm.
do that. But then there's kind of like, I'll know the things like, "Oh, well, Jeff really likes this when he's having a bad day," or have these things in my arsenal to pull out for you when you're like, you show up in tears because you're just done. Uh,
Yeah.
recognizing and just paying attention to what that athlete, um sort of craves as a comfort food or drink, is important. Yeah.
Yeah. Is there one staple food or dish that, like, most people are really into that you make for these FKTs?
Uh, Gosh, one thing that I always make for this one particular crew, again, I'll use the athlete from Australia. Um, I've been fortunate to do a few expeditions with her, and we often have a lot of the same contract workers on that team, so it's like 5 or 6 of us, and it's not uncommon for us to all have, like, a really crappy day at the same time. If pouring down rain and the athlete's a disaster emotionally because she's just tired, and everyone else is just, like, feeling it, like, there's always a benefit to or like, comfort that comes from a really just easy tomato soup and grilled cheese.
Yeah. Simple and satisfying right there.
It is, and everyone just kind of melts into the meal, and then all of a sudden, the silence goes to, like, a little chatter, and then it's like, "Okay, we're gonna survive after all."
Totally. Yeah. Yeah, it's fascinating. I this topic is something that just doesn't, you don't hear about it so much in sports, but it's so important, is the fueling. So I guess on that point too, I'm wondering, is it your job to guess or work with the athlete to hit nutritionals and macros, or do they usually have a dietitian that's giving you guidelines? How do the actual makeup of the food, how does that come about?
Mhm. Yeah, I love that question, Jeff. So two things. The athlete either has a dietitian that they work with, and if that's the case, then long before the expedition even starts, the dietitian and I are in communication. Because they're the professional in that field. I have a lot of
Yeah.
experience in nutrition courses and that sort of thing, but I'm not a registered dietitian. And if they have done this work up to a certain point, it's not wise and it's honestly disrespectful of me to just be like, I got it. We don't need you.
Yeah.
That's not cool. So I work with them for weeks leading up to the project. In this case of that same athlete we just mentioned, Stephanie Howe is actually her RD. Um, and Stephanie and I work really well together. She's one of like 3 RDs that I just kind of have on speed dial. If I'm anywhere in the world and I can just message them on WhatsApp, like, oh my gosh, this is what's happening. What do you think? Or, hey, this is kind of what I've been doing with this athlete. I know they're not your athlete, but here's kind of the like frame of the house. What do you think? So Stephanie and I work really well together. Um, she also happens to live in France, so it was nice to be on the same time zone this time, but if the athlete does not have, um, an RD, that's when I kind of just take on all of encompassing of everything, but, and that's always fun as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, last question before we move into some other topics here, but I'm wondering how you decide which projects you can take on and which you do take on. Is it a passion, an intrigue, a money thing? How do you know what works?
It's sort of all of those things, right? And I think the fact that you kind of used those as bullet points says we're pretty much on the same page as far as how we fill our calendar.
Yeah.
So first, is my calendar available?
Yep.
Second, am I a good fit for this project and the athlete and vice versa? Especially if we're spending a month together, like in an RV or a van.
Yeah.
We're in another country. That's really important because it shouldn't be there's gonna be days that are just really hard even for the best of friends. Uh,
Totally.
so that's really important. Um, the budget, the money, no matter what, that's gotta be part of it. I've got a mortgage to pay, my time is valuable, um and what the way I structure things is I more often than not will have a daily rate, and then the food budget comes out of my daily rate.
It's really
It's just easier than at the end of being like, "Here's your shoebox full of receipts that you know."
yeah,
Right? And it's honestly a little bit it keeps me honest with just controlling that food cost and not overspending for the client, and, it's easier for me to kind of keep things dialed, and it's sort of one-stop shopping, so that feels like historically for the clients that I've worked with on long attempts, that just makes things a lot easier. It's like, "How many days is it? Great, this is my day rate, this is the total."
easy. Yeah. I'm
Yeah.
sure at the end of it, they're thankful for that too, because they have so many other receipts to go through.
Yeah, they don't need to deal with any of my stuff. So if I can kind of manage that, it also adds value to hiring me, honestly, because it makes it a little more streamlined. Um, and also if what else I have coming up? So let's say if I have a month-long project in July, I'm not going to take another month-long project in August. Like
Yeah. What's the point of having a house if you're just on the road?
Yeah, like, when I'm not so if I book a month-long gig, um, the month before that, I really try at least, if nothing else, 3 of the 4 weeks before that, I don't book anything else that's blocked off because there's time to prep for that, and I also just wanna be, present and spend time with my husband, and, we have a Saint Bernard and a Great Dane and all the things, and then when I get back home from an expedition that's long like that, then I usually take the next month off as well. I might have like, if it's like a 2-day something or other, I could do that. But otherwise, I really try to just then I bookend as much as possible.
Totally. Yeah. Now I want to move more into the other thing you've taken on a little more recently of on the more agent side or representing helping athletes. So I'm wondering how it started because it sounds like you obviously work directly with athletes on projects on the food side, but I'm sure you also worked and communicated with brands on budget side too. So was it hard to know both sides and was that a concern going in and how did deciding it was going to work out and you had a place there to officially be on the representative side as well work.
Um, yeah, that's the sort of the $1,000,000 question right now. I think when people first started hearing that I was helping and just kind of working, doing some athlete management and agent work, it was like, "What? This lady's a chef. What is she doing? This doesn't make any sense." Um, so I think first it's important to know when I'm hired for any sort of long anything, or even let's say like a 2-day something, or a fun run at a running store or cycling store, it is almost 100% of the time the brand manager or the athlete manager that hires me.
Yeah.
So I have 10 years of those relationships because that's what I've been doing with Rad for 10 years. They're the ones that hire me. So I have spent a lot of time with them. They've become some of my dearest friends, our brand athlete managers, marketing managers. Um, and, like anything organically, when you spend time with friends, you start talking about what their job is and work. And so the conversations really were very easy for me to just be present for and brainstorm with these friends who also happen to be the people that hired me, who also happen to be on the other side of the coin, the people that choose the athletes that are sponsored.
Mhm.
And then, as you said, I spend my days with professional athletes. So they're the ones that I feed and show up with. Or let's say John G. If Kyla was like, "Hey, we're gonna have a team training camp. We're gonna rent a VRBO for a week. Can you come and stay at this house with us and feed everyone?" So now I'm spending time with everybody.
Mhm.
And as that's happened over the past decade, again, some of my dearest, dearest friends are professional athletes. I've race directors even. I did Amanda Basham's baby shower, catered that. Abby and Cordis Hall's wedding shower or bridal shower. Um, Caleb and Kelsey, who are the race directors and owners of High Lonesome, I catered their wedding. Sh it's fun. I feel I'm selfish sometimes because my job is literally just I get to hang out with my friends. Uh, but so that's sort of how it started, and as I spend time and days or weeks on end with an entire team of athletes, um, you get to know them, and then if I'm at their house dropping food off, they might say, "Hey, what do you know about this brand?" Or "I'm being courted by this brand," or they just kind of ask these questions very low key, or they're like, "I can't show you this, but what do you think about that?" I'll be like, "That's really interesting because I was at someone else's house."
Yeah.
So, and you can't like, I want to be respectful of everyone involved. So there's certain information that you can share a healthy amount of information without crossing any lines.
Yeah, especially before you sign a contract too.
Yes, exactly. So throughout the years, that sort of grew like every the few years. Again, my company's 10 years old at this point. Somewhere around like the third and fourth year, athletes would just be like, "What do you think of this?" They start asking me, "Can you look at this?" Or I just so it became more and more. And then the brand managers or marketing directors would just straight up send me a message. They'd be like, "Hey, we've got a spot on our team. This is the person that we're looking for. Do you know anyone that checks these boxes?"
Mhm.
And I'd be like, "I totally do."
Yeah.
And so that's sort of how it all started kind of coming about. And the past 2 years, my husband kept saying, like, this is taking a lot more of your time. You really also seem to like it. And you seem kind of good at it. Like, would you ever want to do this officially? And I had always just been like, oh, I don't know if I have enough experience to do that yet. Because if someone's gonna hire me, Jeff, and they trust me to take care of them in this way, like, I really wanted to make sure that I was capable for that. And
Totally.
this past last year, I was like, "Okay, I I really like this. I think I could be good at it." And I'm really fortunate to have, to be deeply connected in a very full circle way, which I think I don't I my allegiance is to whoever I'm working with. I have no problem mentioning to an athlete that's like, "Oh, this happened and that," or like with the brand. Like the brand is not any more the bad guys than the athlete is. For every story that an athlete tells me about a brand, I can give you a story about a brand like that had a bad experience with an athlete. So we need to own our own shit.
Yep.
Uh,
Totally.
And I think that's really an important tool to share with a client, whether I'm working with an athlete or a brand.
Yeah. Has it gotten hard being friends with both sides almost and then having one that you're representing to have conversations or ask for more or yeah, just talk to like a brand manager of like this won't work, but we're still friends type of thing? Cause I'm curious on that relationship because I'm sure not every negotiation goes perfectly either.
Yeah, I thank you for asking that. It hasn't. And again, so much of it, Jeff, is just in delivery and respecting the job and role that each person has. If they're like,
Yeah.
look, Kelly, we cannot do that. And this is why. Or if they're like, we just can't. I'm like, all right, let me just speak with you. Let's remove the athlete from this. And I'll be like, Jeff, can you just I'm going to call you back. Let me just figure this out and then we'll get you back in. Um, Sometimes a conversation can get heated and it feels respectful to not do that with an audience. It's like, shut the office door. Right.
Yep. Yeah.
Um, and I can be like, okay, I understand you can't do it, but can you just tell me why? So maybe we could come up with a creative way to do something that works a little bit um, more collaborative or creative with for each of us involved. But no, it doesn't. And again, I think a lot of that is because I am not a kid anymore and I learned those lessons of like, we don't have to come in and turn the tables over to have a conversation. And, if we don't get what we want, that doesn't mean that that person's a bad guy. It's just, they have a job to do as well.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
All right, a couple more on the agent side that I'm curious about. How, when you represent someone, say, in negotiating all their athletic income, how do you get paid? Is it by a percentage or a fee? How does an agent get paid in this space?
I think traditionally most agents, and again, so I kind of operate as agent and manager.
Mhm.
Um, the agent role itself most specifically focuses on negotiating contracts, which is great if that's what some agents do. That's just the, kind of their role, and uh, I really kind of appreciate because I'm an emotionally driven person. I really appreciate the holistic approach and working with the athlete as a whole. So an agent will often, I think it's kind of just normal in agent space and other sports is to take a percentage of the contract. So let's say you have, I don't know, 5 contracts. You've got like kind of your main one, the top tier of whatever it's usually footwear. Sometimes it's all encompassing footwear and apparel. And then you might have let's say pulls like Lecky or something or Petzl. And then you have a nutrition one and whatever else, maybe eyewear in there. So an agent would take 10% of uh, each of those contracts for the length of the contract. So let's say you make $50,000 a year and you have a 3-year contract. They're going to take 10% of that 50 grand every year for 3 years.
Yeah. Cool.
there's a couple of agencies rather, that take 15% of contracts that they solidify and 10% of ones that get brought to them. A question I get a lot is, well, if the contract was already in place, you won't take any money from that, right? And I'll answer your question fully here in a minute, but um, for the person that says that, I fully understand that question. But then when that same athlete spends hours asking me questions about the existing contract that they don't want me to have any money from, but they want to use my services and knowledge to help them, that's disrespectful.
Totally.
That's
Yeah.
not cool at all. So that has brought me to, with the exception of one athlete, I work on a retainer system. I don't take a percentage of what the athlete gets from their contract. I only have one athlete I do that with, and of all the contracts that she has, I only touch one of them, and the percentage I take is from her base salary. It is not from her entire contract. And uh, I think what the bulk of most agents do, Jeff, is they'll take, like, if the athlete wins, I don't know, UTMB, and they get $50,000, the agent gets a percentage of that. Um, I I did not help that athlete run UTMB, so I feel like I'm not entitled to a bonus. But the agents who do take that, I think their argument is often, "Well, we secured the contract that allowed you to have that bonus," which I also understand. It's probably not a good business model for me. I suspect I could make 3 times the amount of money that I do, but, um, I also turn athletes away that come to me that are like, "I really just want some looking for someone to help me find new partnerships." And I'll be like, "Well, what else are you looking for?" And they're like, "That's really all I need. Like, I'm not the best fit for you, if that's
Yeah.
which doesn't mean that I don't applaud what they're doing, but I want more out of who I'm working with. I would like an actual relationship with that athlete and to help them grow in all of the areas of representing themselves, so one day they can leave me and have the confidence and the knowledge to handle things on their own and use their own voice."
Yeah, and I think that's the important thing too, because there's so much probably around the time you got into representing athletes too that was behind like walls that no one knew anything about each other's contracts and things like that. So,
Mhm.
first off, thanks for being open and sharing because no one knows anything about what's happening with kind of the rise of representation, too. But on that note, what athletes do you suspect need an agent or an agent would help them? What kinds of athletes and what kind do you probably get contacted by, but you tell don't need an agent?
Yeah, I really appreciate that question. We had a couple friends over for dinner the other night, and they were like, they sort of asked me the same thing, and uh, I spoke to an athlete, a really young athlete, a couple months ago, and her parents were on the call, like super up and coming. Um, not in the trail running space, but mountain biking, and they were like, "We really want to agent. This is what we're doing." So I was like, "Well, let me meet your daughter." And so we meet and we talk, and it was immediately apparent to me that this sweet kiddo was not ready for an agent, and they had no business with. And at the end of the call, when she was gone, I spoke to him. I was like, "Look, I super enjoyed meeting your daughter. She's amazing, as are you as her parents for helping to get her dreams, like, bringing her dreams to life." Um, but I think the best thing she could do right now is just continue being a kid and
Mhm.
race and go to school and, be a ding dong and just a silly kid, right? Um, and, feel free to reach back out in 6 months and we can revisit it again because, when kids are, she's like young teenager. Uh, that growth, emotional growth is what was kind of lacking. And I don't have any intention of taking someone's money when I cannot help them or I personally don't feel that they're ready. So sometimes my answer is, especially to the athlete who might, let's say someone who's all of a sudden they have the ultraman bug or the FKT bug, and they're like, "I did this, or I just threw height the AT or the PCT last year. I am are on fire, um, which I love, right? That passion is so exciting. But more often than not, when they don't have any sponsors yet and they're really green to the sport, more often than not, my answer is, I don't know that, I can suggest or recommend you have an agent right now, or at least I don't feel comfortable working with you. But my advice to you would be to just put your head down and keep doing what you do for another year or so, and then see where you are.
Yeah. And so what on that note, when someone I've gotten a couple questions about how to make things work in this realm. So I want
Mm.
to dive a little deeper into this. What do brands care about when maybe you're before getting an agent or a sponsor or contract? Is it like social media? Is it community? Is it results? Like what are the main pillars or and then what's maybe overvalued in a lot of younger athletes' minds that doesn't matter quite so much?
Yeah, you sort of just literally listed 3 boxes that, most brands use as their pillars. So
I'm
one
trying not to ask leading questions here, but I guess I might be.
No, I think it's so great because it's also really telling, right? Like, so one is community, and not just are you a good representative or good representation of our community as a whole for trail running or through hiking or fill in the blank sport, right? And then beyond that is how do you fit in with the community of this brand, wherever the
Mhm.
fill in the blank brand is? Let's say it's, I don't know what, Sunto. So maybe it's Sunto. And then that would go back to, like, when an athlete reaches out to Stinto, knowing, like, go to their website and find out what their mission statement is or what their ethos is. Yeah.
Totally.
Right? Like, that's
Yeah.
the first thing. I mean, their timepieces are beautiful and they've been around for quite a while, but what do I know about that brand? Like, know those things before, and that will help
Mhm.
you understand if you're a fit because the marketing team sure knows what a good fit is, and these are the boxes they'll be looking for. So let's say it was Sunto community. So community as a whole and the community of Sunto's team and team of athletes. And then the next one would be like marketing. So it would be social media, YouTube, if you're like, "Well, I don't have YouTube, but my social media, my Instagram slash whatever this is my handle, and this is the kind of content that I have." I love to do like go to local like events or running stores or whatever. Are you in the public eye? Does the customer see you? That's what it's really all about, right?
Yeah. I
Uh,
mean, it's selling products at the end of the day, so you
it
gotta find
really
a
is.
customer.
Yeah, exactly. Um, and then the other one is performance, and this is a really important one for people to hear. Performance as are you performing? Meaning, are you showing up? Are you present at your FKTs or in the FKT community? If you're a racer, are you showing up at the races? And like, physically, are you there? Like, are
Mhm.
you performing and racing, if that's what's important to them? Some brands, it's not so much the racing, so I just wanna put a pin in, like, Arc'teryx, so remind me to go back to that. Again, let's just say Suunto for the sake of my some sort of fluidity here, and then it's say, like, where are you performing? If you're someone that's on the podium in races that are important to that brand, that's something else, and it's not because they really want you to win, which, that's always a bonus because they want strong,
Mhm.
fast athletes, but it all goes back to what gear, whether it's footwear or apparel or the watch again that you were wearing, it all goes back to sales because performance is sales. Sales is
Yep.
performance.
Yeah, and I think to echo and add to that, one thing with performance and sales and stuff, one thing that I think a lot of some athletes do well and some don't do is highlighting like their race nutrition integrated with their nutrition sponsor or these shoes I wore, whether it's an Instagram post or on guest on a podcast or something. I think that's an area that feels like athletes could do a lot better of so bringing up that brand so that you've blown away expectations when you come time for a contract review is they need to sell products so that they can pay you basically. And if you're not highlighting what's getting you to that spot, then you're really not doing your job as an athlete.
Exactly, that's perfect. At the end of the day, we would all like to think that someone was like, "I'm gonna start a company so I can, uh, hire athletes to be on my team." Like, they started the company about a project they were passionate about in hopes to make a lot of money. That's
Totally.
it goes back to Jeff of us saying, like, it's not about someone else's brand is not about me. It's about the brand. If I can
Totally.
get a contract worker along for the ride, that's a bonus. But make no mistake, this brand doesn't exist to keep athletes living in Marin County or Boulder, Colorado.
Yeah. Yeah. And I would say to start, just as a footnote, I think everyone is unique and special. But personally, I passed on a shoe contract at one point in my life. And 2 weeks later, I, with how the announcement went, I know exactly who took the same contract. So there is always the next person in line. And that's okay to pass and not take things, but they don't need you necessarily either, I think, to
Yeah.
unfortunately, sorry, everyone.
No, that is such a great, great statement, Jeff. Last week, I had an athlete and they had an existing partner already. The contract was coming up and they were being courted by another brand. Really big opportunity. And the other brand was like, look, we need the answer to this by tomorrow at I think it was like 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Otherwise, yeah. And it was very apparent when this athlete I was working with and representing said no, that they were going to be like, okay, you're up.
Yeah, yeah, on to the next person.
Yeah. So I
But
thank you for saying that. Yeah.
yeah, so what's the Arc'teryx pin that you want?
Arc'teryx is really unique in that they are a lot like, La Sportiva,
It is.
and, there's a couple other brands out there that are so like the very mountain-centric brands that are really multi-sport, right? So Arc'teryx is like climbing, trail running, skiing, and they are now more successful monetarily in that space, the most successful brand under the Amersport, umbrella, which
Okay.
and they share that they're under that umbrella with Solomon, so that's important
Yep,
for people to
and
know.
Sunto, I believe, yeah.
Exactly. So Arc'teryx, I'll use Arc'teryx and Sportiva, it's completely unrelated. But both of those companies, brands are what is important for them is not so much an athlete that's like on the podium, although that's great and they applaud that, cheer for that. But it's a person that lives that mountain lifestyle. That's what's important to them. So for them, that's in that performance sort of category. Because let's say if you have someone who is just, I'll use like Kyle Richardson. I don't know if you know Kyle.
Yeah, yeah.
But
He's under the radar, but a mountain person.
yeah, and he's also one of the things I love about Kyle is he doesn't exist to race. Like I feel like if that kid showed up at a race, people should be shaking in their boots because he is a savage athlete. He's an exceptional runner. He's, a cyclist, and he's a climber, and he's just lives in the mountains. I mean, he's constantly running up and down Logs Peak.
Yeah,
I
that's been his pet project for a number of years.
yeah.
Yeah.
So Kyle is a good example, and he's a creative. He's also a musician, so he makes music for all kinds of different projects. But he's a really great example of someone that would probably be a great fit for Arc'teryx or Sportiva, and he's actually worked with Sportiva in the past, but because truly lives that lifestyle, and he is exceptional as far as like video and still work. His content really brings that brand to life.
Yeah, almost like a Joe Grant, I
Yeah,
believe,
yeah,
too, would be
mhm,
in that vein.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Now I want to move kind of into the larger industry, especially because it's been an interesting month of stuff. But we'll start on the positive side of um, what you think is going well in the sport or the trails, FKTs stuff in general. And just to kind of start from my point of view, I think that the competition and the rise of different brands, whether it's nutrition companies, gear, innovation, really strong. A lot of great races too with the demand is coming up. And I think just creating more opportunities for people to race as hard rock and Western become a lot harder to get into. But yeah, what do you think is going well or in a good spot with the sport before we go to the negative side after this?
I'm curious to hear what you're just going to say about the negative side. I think what I love right now that I'm sort of seeing is every single component is growing.
Mhm.
And whether it's a lot or a little or a little bit and then a little bit more, and then there's a pause, like everything, whether it's product, new brands, more people, new generations coming into our sport, um, and new different kinds of races, different race directors. We can't mention any of this without speaking about like live stream and how things are just being reported on more. What did I see this new account? I don't know who it is. I messaged him the other day because I was like, "I think what you're doing is really cool." I think it's called the, Ultra Running Minute? Is it
Oh
UR
yeah, I had Ken Seals on here actually.
Did you? I need to listen to it. Thank you for telling me that. Yeah, I love that. It's just like little stuff popping up, like we're growing so much. If we compare, um the community of trail running or like long trail sort of like FKT attempts to the big three of like basketball, football, baseball. Uh,
Yeah.
right? Those have been around for generations. And I think it was probably 85 years ago, the very first NFL game was televised.
Yeah.
We're just starting the past like 5 years.
On YouTube too. We're not like mainstream.
Exactly, exactly. That's such a great point. Um, so we are so fortunate, like, we're building this.
Mhm.
We like, right now, I mean, I hate to get all, like, Goonies speech on us, like, from the movie Goonies, but also a great movie. This truly is the time like, we are all witnessing it, and we're all part of it, and every one of us has a just little step, little footprint in this. We have a really unique time right now to shape the way that our sport shows up in the future in a way that, let's say, again, football, baseball, basketball, if they want to bring changes to that sport, each of those sports, that's a big, big effort, and it will take years for any sort of shift. We're so fortunate right now to be at the coolest time for our sport. That's a good stuff.
Yeah, and it's amazing and really cool that like competition between new products and stuff seems to be elevating most brands involved. So
Mhm.
whether it's footwear, whether it's I don't know, nutrition, or even like now there's competitors to the I think it's Morton sodium bicarbonate, which was really expensive. Now there's competitors. Like it's a big enough industry that when someone has a market cap, someone else can come in, like, "Here's a better super shoe from to compete with the current best one." I
Yeah.
think that is what's gonna really elevate and make the sport healthy is you need multiple players in the sport, and before we didn't really about 20 years ago.
Right, right. Someone just asked me in a text the other day, let me see if I can pull it up. It was like, why do you think no these big brands aren't sponsoring races anymore? Let me find it, Jeff, because I think it's here it is. Where does it start? There aren't more legacy brands contributing to sport outside of sponsoring elite athletes. The brands that I've noticed sponsoring race series and events are blah, blah, blah. How is it that smaller brands are more invested in those areas than some serious legacy brands? So I like that question a lot, but um, the answer that came to my mind pretty quickly was don't forget that these brands that were kind of, the legacy brands
Mhm.
that are not investing in those areas right now. Don't forget, they already invested in that. If they're not now, it's because they learned a lesson of why, like, it wasn't profitable or it wasn't whatever. They've already done that. So these smaller brands that are now doing that are just new brands that haven't figured that out yet. So this is where they are able to reach and those options are open. because other brands aren't jumping in there. So it's just kind of a little bit of a shift of things, but that's a repeated pattern that's going to be that's a pattern that's just going to continue. Yeah.
Yeah, I also think I don't know if it's to the contrary or not, but the smaller brands, they can be more nimble, or if it is
Mhm.
like a very small brand where the founders still travel out to these events, that is a huge way to market versus some legacy brands that have been around since the start of the running boom. They can advertise in the Super Bowl, but the way to meet face to face and get converting interactions for these small brands is to put their product at an aid station or to have like a trial at the expo or something. So I think it's both. So it's almost not worth the bigger brand's time, but for the smaller brands, that leaves this big opportunity to be front facing and introduce themselves, because I think it's hard in a sport that really is just addicted to watching other people's Strava and gathers 4 or 5 times a year at their races.
Yeah.
You only get those 4 or 5 chances to get your product in someone's hands.
Yeah, I think I'm super agreeing with that, and um, it's important to like we don't all have to be in the same space all the time. There's
Totally.
things that just it's probably better if we're not, right? And then supporting other brands as some dip in and out. And quite frankly, we can't have the same question of why are we paying athletes more, but also expecting these same brands that we want to pay the athletes more show up huge at these races and spend their budget on that race when if they weren't at the race, they could pay the athletes more.
Yeah. And that leads to where it's at, maybe, or what is left to be desired. And I think a number of things. One is it does seem like this fresh new thing, like fastest growing sport, pops up a lot, but it's not that big. And a lot of bigger brands dip in and out of the market, which I think
Mhm.
can be a disruptor, especially for the people who they invest in, who are in the space to stay, dipping in and out. I also I think we have a bit it's gonna be interesting how things go with the progression of regional races versus, I believe, live streaming elevates a lot of races very quickly to this hard to get in levels, such as like High Lonesome, with more and more difficult lottery to get into. And then of course you have the more legacy races. So it does seem like something like, I talked about this on a recent one too, maybe like Wasatch or Bighorn, or these races that have been around a long time, that if they don't embrace the live streaming technology, they'll still sell out, but it's almost dropping down a tier versus bringing live streaming in can raise things up a tier as well. And then my last negative, I think, is it's probably more permeates society in general of, it seems like there's a lot of entitlement on the athlete side, especially a new athlete with a few results or something too.
Mhm.
And I think that can be paired right with the brands that dip in and out, because I think it's a sport really built on like an AJW commentating, bringing forward the past, or the history is only like 50 years old of Western states of this continual movement. And I think someone coming in quickly and expecting a lot, but not giving or respecting where it's come from, is a bit of a worry, just because it is really built on such lore that's really cool. But that's a worry that it could be lost as well.
Yeah, that's a good conversation. You have good stuff, Jeff, in your brain.
Oh, thanks. I just think all day I live alone.
Um, yeah, it's really interesting to think back. So I'm 54, and when I first found out trail running or ultra running rather even existed, was in the 90s. And I remember when Scott Jurek first ran Western States, and they were like, "Oh, this kid, whatever, he's he
Yep.
he won't win." And then he won, and it was almost like it uh, for those who aren't aware of all this, it was not embraced. He was not embraced well because he was the new young disruptor, and then obviously proved himself fairly quickly. But knowing that history, like there's always room for new stuff, but um it's really important. I think your mention of like just being aware of and remembering the history of our sport, and that the people that kind of built the frame to that house, they really put in a lot of work. And what we
all these races all these races take a lot of work, and I think that can
have
be lost sometimes.
Yeah, and what we have now would not exist if it weren't for, um, what took place in the '90s and early aughts. Like, that started all of this stuff. So, I also love, like, we'll mention Bighorn because you mentioned, Wasatch and Bighorn. I just love that there are still races that are just, like, grassroots
Mhm.
and represent, like, the good old days. I probably sound like a old lady, like, "Kids these days," but
No, I've started noticing I say that now too.
I love the growth, I really do, but I think, what's really unique about our sport and community is it allows for a little bit of everything. It allows for like, just bare bones races, and it allows for UTMBs and Western States sort of thing. And, that wouldn't happen again with, compared to any of the big 3 sports. That wouldn't happen in baseball. I mean, they still have, like, farm teams, but your farm team then goes up into, major league.
Yeah.
Uh, it's different. Our sport is really unique, and then it allows for and embraces all of these different levels.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's just interesting too, because it feels like since COVID, it's been a little bumpy for some brands since then, but a lot of new money has come into the sport. And like Hoka advertises on my favorite national #1 sports podcast, and it's like the host can't even say Hoka right, but it's like, wow, they've gone so far. It's just wild the money that's involved in the sport now, I think. And that's the weird thing to juxtapose with athletes too. And the more athletes, the more money. A number of them will have bad interactions that will come out too, but I don't know. As a whole, I think it's headed the right direction.
Yeah, I think it is. And I think the bulk of our community is probably under the impression that there's a lot of money in this sport, and it might seem that way because we're in it. But collectively, if you look at, we're sort of like, I like to say we're kind of like a Horton Hears a Who size sport.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
because we are, and when you're in it, it's just all encompassing, and it just, pulls you in. But when companies like and people are like, "Oh, New Balance, why don't they have trail anymore?" They don't have trail anymore, or they don't spend them. They have trail shoes, obviously, but they don't have this big trail team anymore because their trail shoes bring in like 8 to 9% of like, the money coming in is from trail. That's it. Saucony's the same way. So, it's a bad business decision to stay
Yeah.
in it if that's what you're doing. Um, it's really there's a lot, and that's probably why a lot of companies collab with in and out with trail running, because from the outside it might look like, hey, this is the hot new thing, and then they get in, they're like, that wasn't hot enough. We got to dip back out. So I get it. I really do. Um, but there's a like, and I'm not saying like I love I'll use Satisfy, like their product is so beautiful. It's stunning. It's super sexy stuff. Um, but when the average person in trail running cannot afford to buy a top and a bottom from them because it's hundreds and hundreds of dollars, or your average run specialties shop cannot afford to keep Satisfy on the floor because they can't afford to buy it to keep it in the store, and then when they get it in the store, they don't have clients to buy it. Um, I would love to see if they could do, like, something that was a little bit more price approachable for this community. Uh but I understand, like, that's not who they are. That's not what they represent. They're different, and that's fine.
Mhm.
But knowing that up front and not confusing them with a brand like, I don't know, Brooks or Hoka or fill in the blank, where they exist for trail running and running. I think that's the important thing to remember. Know who you're getting in bed with.
Totally. Yeah, I mean, doubling as a industry could be from 4 to 8% of the shoe market, and that's still a tiny footnote on a balance sheet.
It
So,
really is, yeah, and if you're a company, again, like Satisfy, they have such beautiful products, those things that cost a lot of money to make, and if you have something that's really only bringing in, like, 4 to 8%, it's pretty easy to see that that's the best business decision is to, walk lightly in that area.
yeah, and just to go back to the advertising at races and things, I think sometimes people think these brands don't advertise because they're not into the space. But what brings more traffic to their trail section, their website, is just people going to the website looking for road shoes. So advertising at a trail race, unfortunately, is probably a waste of money for some of those
Yeah,
brands.
yeah, I love that conversation. That's such a good point. And I think we need to hear those things for those of us that are like, oh, well, they would make so much money. No, they won't. They really won't.
Yeah, not compared to how much they make. No,
They're not.
Nike's nationally trade or internationally traded public company. They're not
Yeah,
looking at trail running for the leg up.
absolutely. And again, I'll use New Balance as another example. They're really savvy with what they do. Like, for you and I, like, we grew up running in New Balance, or they were in the running world for us. But if you go and open any J. Crew catalog or go to J. Crew's website, they sell really beautiful lifestyle New Balance shoes that are made very specific colorways or patterns just for J. Crew. And I'm certain, like, lifestyle's where it's at.
Yeah, totally. I mean, everyone's into
Funny.
lifestyle.
Yeah.
Yeah, we just think our niche is a lot bigger than it is.
Yeah, it's really not, and I'm grateful for that, but I think it's a really important conversation for people to kind of, understand it might feel big, but it's at the end of the day, it's not as big as people think.
Yeah, totally. All right, I got 2 more quick hitter kinda questions here, and I think this first one will be kind of fun of what do you wish people knew more about professional athletes? So one might be that they don't just have to run all the time or something like that just to get
Uh-huh.
you started. But what do you, because you work with them, what do you wish people actually knew about their lives?
That they're just like you and me, I mean, I could give you a
Totally.
list of people that have, like, stayed in my spare bedroom when they're traveling for races. It's pretty extraordinary. They all show up in my kitchen in their pajamas and slippers in the morning, and there with messy hair and sleep in their eyes. They're just normal human beings.
Yeah, and it's a real job. I think it's kinda lost that all they do is run and race, but there are a lot of obligations between shoots and products and meetings and
Yeah,
all kind appearances, activations. I think it's lost that it can be a pretty tough lifestyle, especially with travel and stuff too, so they are normal
absolutely.
people.
Careful what you wish for. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it may look good. And then, the last question I had is what are some of the mistakes or I guess, what mistakes do young athletes make that wanna make this their career that you should think they should not make?
Mm. I think that for me, it's easy to see that the number one thing is, don't quit your day job.
Yeah, that's a big one.
One, because you're gonna need that monetarily. And two, more often than not, it's kinda like the football player that gets injured that quit school to go to pro and has no idea what to do now and doesn't have a career. Um, More often than not, the athletes who have a career or something else going on outside of their sport, um, it's easier for them to move through difficult times as an athlete. Their emotional and mental health is tied to other things instead of just their sports, and
Yeah,
that is really important. Yeah.
yeah, and we've seen a lot of athletes start, like, maybe podcasts or Substacks or writing, like, creative outlets too have been really cool to see, like, this depth
Completely.
to a person as well. Maybe they're not pro either, but it's like everyone just like you, culinary world as well as the trail world. Everyone has multiple facets, and it's fun with more avenues to get to see those in people that we look up to and follow just for one pursuit, to see they have many.
Yeah, absolutely. Life will be more exciting if you have more than just something you're focusing on. Like the very nature of being a professional athlete prompts us to focus on ourselves all the time. And that does not, for me anyway, that does not feel healthy.
Yeah, your biggest running influencers that you follow, their following is still the size of a Midwest city that you've never heard of. So,
Yes. Yes.
so,
I love
so,
it.
you
So
know,
true. Yeah.
yeah, no, I've said that to a lot of younger people, like, put your effort in places other than having a small Midwest city following.
I love that. Yeah.
Well, thanks so much for joining. This was awesome.
Yeah, you bet. Your questions were so great, Jeff. Thank you for just being thoughtful and intentional with how you show up on this podcast. It's good stuff.
Thanks. It's good for me, good practice for me to talk to people. Thank you for listening to the show. 5-star reviews really help. Patreon.com/freeoutside, freeoutside.substack.com. You can find the podcast on Instagram, where we share the best clips. It's just me. I do all this. And on YouTube, if you subscribe, it really helps the show. I actually make some money from the YouTube side, and from johng.com if you go there and tell them we sent you. And if you just play this on repeat or stream it for your dog, I probably get like a nickel, so that's pretty good. All right. Thank you guys for listening. It is early in the morning and I have a treadmill workout, so that's going to suck today. All right. Stay late, my friends.